Hello and welcome to the Dairy Fairy channel. I'm here to help you through some of the most common breastfeeding problems that most moms have to struggle through. Our first one is about dealing with oversupply or overfast letdown. You can have either one separately or both together is more common. The difference between them is a oversupply. You have more than a full feed in each breast. So even after you thoroughly empty one breast and it feels mushy squishy, and when you express a drop, it's opaque, and you haven't even started on the other side, and it feels very, very full. So that's oversupply. You can have oversupply so bad that you may not even get through one breast in a full feed. You can also have an overfast letdown, where your breasts feel normally comfortably full before a feed, but about 1 to 3 minutes into the feed, when you have that letdown and the baby goes from the normal choop, 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 choop suck to suck, swallow, breathe, suck, swallow, breathe, they start to choke and sputter, or they'll pull back to the tip of the nipple because they're having trouble coping with the fast flow. So you can have an overabundance of milk, or you can have a normal amount of milk and it just all comes out really fast. The way that you usually end up with an oversupply can be like I did, where with my first son, he would nurse. Then he would choke and sputter and throw up all inside my bra, and then finish feeding on that same breast. And then I didn't know any better, so I would pump the other side thoroughly empty. And I would do that at each feed. My body assumed that I was feeding twins, and I had a really bad oversupply. And it can be very painful. It can make you more prone to clogged ducts and mastitis. And you have to take the pump with you everywhere if you're always pumping at every feed. And that can take a lot of the comfort and portability out of breastfeeding when you have to bring a pump with you. So if you have oversupply, it's most common first thing in the day. Most moms have the most amount of milk that they're going to have in the whole day when they first wake up in the morning. A lot of moms only feed from one side first thing in the morning. A lot of our working moms choose to pump just the other side one time first thing in the day, and that will give them a bottle or two to get them through. And that one breast one time a day doesn't seem to ratchet up supply terribly like I did pumping after every feed because I didn't know any better. It's also most common in the first 6 weeks of breastfeeding. The first 2 to 6 weeks, your body's just getting regulated to what the baby needs. So your body may err on the side of overproduction, and you may end up having to do a little bit of block feeding, where you feed from one breast for one feed, or maybe even for 2 or 3 feeds until that breast is thoroughly emptied. And you'll only be hand expressing or using like a haka or even a pump, and just removing just enough milk that you aren't uncomfortable or painful. You don't want to end up with clogs from being overfull for too long. Overpumping is another way that a lot of moms end up with an oversupply. So they do like I did and pump after every time, thinking that they needed a big stash. But then you can end up having to take care of that stash. If the power goes out, it can all melt. And once it thaws, you only have 24 hours to use that milk. So you don't really need a stash. And currently, especially with all of our viruses going around, you want that baby's saliva on your breast, on your nipple, to have you make the most accurate antibodies that that baby needs at that time. So if you have months old milk, it's not as appropriate immunologically as it is if the baby nursed that day. So you don't need a big stash. The other one is waiting too long in between feeds. Now, every mom, at least once, the baby sleeps a nice big long block at night and you wake up way too overfull. But happening once in a while isn't necessarily oversupply. And generally then moms wake up the baby and feed them, or hand express or pump a little bit so that they're more comfortable. So block feeding is one way of lowering supply In extreme cases, sometimes moms will use green cabbage leaves chilled on the breasts, or ice packs, or even Benadryl or Sudafed if they're allowed to take it, and if the oversupply is to the point where the block feeding isn't even working. Most moms block feed for 1 to 2 feeds per breast before they switch to the other side and do that breast for 2 feeds or so. Although it is common to have one breast that makes a lot more than the other. So you may end up doing the 8 a.m. feed and the 10 a.m. feed on this breast, and then the 12 o'clock feed on this breast, and maybe this one isn't as big an oversupplier, so this one is emptied with just one feed, and then you're back to this side. The most important thing is that you are comfortable and not overfull, and baby is comfortable. Oversupply can make them gassy and fussy and make them want to feed very frequently, but not for very long, because they're overwhelmed by the higher lactose and high flow. So tamping it down to where ideally the baby eats from one breast every 2 hours during the day and every 3 to 4 at night. Now, one way you can deal with an overfast letdown is you can latch the baby on and then you can lean back so that the baby is as high or higher than your breast, so that they're pulling milk uphill instead of having it pour at their throats. Sideline position is very good too if you're suffering from a very fast letdown. Other things you can do is when the baby first latches on and they're doing that quick suck, choop, 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 to get a letdown, and then you'll feel the tingle and the milk is coming and the baby will start gulping and their eyes will get wider and their nose will flare. When that happens, you can take them off, tip them up, and just put like a wash rag or something to catch the runoff, because the milk may spray or it may just drip. And when you have a letdown, you have the glands and then you have the ducts, and there's muscles wrapped around all of those ducts. And when you have a letdown, those muscles contract and the milk is expelled. And if you wait about 3 minutes, then those muscles have relaxed again and the flow will be a little bit slower and the baby will be able to cope with it a little bit. Most babies grow into it by the time they're a couple months old. You can also use the reclined nursing or the wash rag, putting it there to catch it if the baby is choking. It usually is worst with the very first letdown. Most women have 1 to 3 letdowns per feed. And by the time you're a good 20 minutes into the feed and it's maybe the 3rd letdown, the flow is much slower and they're better able to cope with it. So that can help you handle oversupply and overfast letdown. Now, anytime you have any other questions, we have a La Leche League of Central Kitsap Facebook page that you're welcome to join. It's a closed page to help support our community's privacy. And you're also welcome to text me here, or on my cell phone you can text me with ideas for any topics that you'd like. Thank you.